Tonight, we begin with a story as old as time itself, yet as fresh as the morning dew on untouched grass. A tale of two hearts that beat as one before they even knew what love meant. This isn't just any bedtime story. This is the story of the very first love, the original romance that set the template for every tender moment that would follow. So settle in, let your breathing slow, and prepare to drift into the garden where love was born. The world was young then, impossibly young. There were no cities, no roads, no clocks ticking away precious moments. There was only Eden, a place where time moved like honey, sweet and unhurried. The air itself seemed to shimmer with possibility, and every leaf, every flower, every blade of grass pulsed with life so pure it would make angels weep with joy. In this perfect sanctuary lived a man named Adam. He was the first of his kind, crafted with divine hands from the very earth beneath his feet. His eyes held the wonder of someone seeing everything for the first time, because indeed he was. Every sunrise painted the sky in colors he had no names for yet. Every breeze carried scents that made his soul sing without understanding why. He walked through Eden like a child in the world's most beautiful playground, discovering treasures at every turn. But something stirred within Adam's chest, a gentle ache he couldn't quite place. It wasn't hunger, for the trees offered their fruit freely. It wasn't thirst, for crystal streams sang their way through the garden. It was something deeper, a longing that seemed to echo from the very core of his being. He would watch the birds flying together in pairs, their songs harmonizing in ways that made his heart flutter, with recognition of something he'd never experienced. The elephants walked side by side, their trunks intertwined. The deer grazed together, their eyes soft with contentment. Even the butterflies danced in twos, their wings catching the light as they spiraled around each other in endless, joyful circles. Adam felt their happiness, but it only deepened his own mysterious yearning. He tried to name this feeling during his long walks through the garden. Was it sadness? Not quite, for how could he be sad in paradise? Was it curiosity? Perhaps, but it felt much more profound than that. It was as if half of him was missing, as if he was a song with only half its melody, a sunset with only half its colors. One evening, as golden light filtered through the leaves like liquid amber, Adam sat beside a quiet pool. The water reflected not just his face, but his solitude. He spoke aloud to the one who had made him, his voice barely above a whisper. The words came from somewhere deeper than thought, from a place in his soul he was only beginning to discover. And in the gentle stillness that followed, something miraculous began to unfold. A sleep unlike any other settled over Adam. Not the ordinary rest that refreshes the body, but something divine and purposeful. In this sacred slumber, the Creator worked with infinite tenderness, taking from Adam what was already there, fashioning from his very essence a companion who would complete him in ways he had only dreamed. While Adam slept, the garden itself seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. The flowers turned their faces toward where he lay, as if they too understood that something wonderful was about to be born. The streams slowed their rushing, and even the wind moved more softly through the trees, as though all of creation was preparing for a moment that would change everything. From Adam's side, with love as the guiding force, came Eve. She emerged not as a stranger, but as the missing piece of a puzzle that had waited eternally to be completed. Her first breath was a harmony to his, Her heartbeat, the rhythm that had been calling to his from the very beginning. She was bone of his bone, flesh of his flesh. But more than that, she was the answer to every question his heart had whispered in the quiet moments. When Adam awakened, the first thing he saw was her face. And in that instant, the universe made perfect sense. All the longing, all the nameless aching, all the searching melted away like morning mist. His eyes widened with wonder, then softened with recognition. Not the recognition of sight, but of soul meeting soul, of finding the part of himself he never knew was missing. Eve's eyes fluttered open, like flower petals greeting the dawn, and when she looked upon Adam, she smiled with the pure joy of coming home. She had never seen his face before, yet she knew it more intimately than her own reflection. In his eyes, she saw herself, not as a separate being, but as the completion of something beautiful and whole. Adam's first words to her were poetry without practice, love without learning. His voice trembled with emotion as he spoke, each word carrying the weight of cosmic significance. He called her bone of his bones, flesh of his flesh, and in those simple words lived all the romance that would ever be written, all the songs that would ever be sung about love. They stood together in the garden as the sun painted everything in shades of gold and rose. The very air around them seemed to dance with joy, and every creature that witnessed this first meeting fell silent with reverence. The lions paused in their prowling, the birds stopped their singing, and even the busy ants ceased their marching. All of creation recognized that they were witnessing the birth of love itself. Eve reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing against Adam's hand. The touch sent waves of warmth through both of them. Not just physical warmth, but something that reached into the deepest parts of their souls. It was the first time either had touched another being like themselves, and in that simple contact, they discovered a language that needed no words. They walked together through the garden, their steps naturally falling into the same rhythm. Everything they saw seemed new and wonderful, not because the garden had changed, but because they were seeing it through eyes of love. The flowers appeared more vibrant, the fruits tasted sweeter, and the songs of the birds seemed to celebrate their union with melodies more beautiful than any symphony. As they explored their paradise together, they talked in voices soft as whispered prayers. Adam told Eve about the mornings he had watched alone, describing sunrises that now seemed incomplete without her there to share them. Eve listened with eyes that sparkled with understanding, already imagining all the dawns they would greet together. They discovered that they fit together in ways both obvious and subtle. When Adam laughed at the playful antics of a family of rabbits, Eve found herself laughing too, not because she felt obligated, but because his joy naturally became her own. When Eve paused to admire the delicate beauty of a spider's web jeweled with morning dew, Adam found himself seeing the artistry through her eyes, appreciating details he had never noticed before. Their first day together stretched like a beautiful dream that neither wanted to end. They fed each other sweet fruits from the trees, their fingers lingering as they shared each bite. They lay on beds of soft grass, watching clouds drift across the endless blue sky, inventing names for the shapes they saw, in laughing when their imaginations ran wild. As evening approached, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, they found themselves beside the same quiet pool where Adam had felt his first deep longing. But now, instead of solitude reflected in the water, they saw themselves together, two faces so different, yet so perfectly complementary that they seemed to have been designed by the same loving hand. Eve traced the reflection of Adam's face with her finger, creating gentle ripples that made both their images dance together on the water's surface. In that simple gesture lived all the tenderness that would ever exist between two people in love. It was innocent and pure, yet profound beyond words. Adam took her hand in his, marveling at how perfectly her fingers fit between his own. They sat in comfortable silence as the first stars began to appear, each point of light seeming to wink at them in celebration. The night sounds of the garden created a lullaby around them, but neither felt sleepy. They were too enchanted with each other, too amazed by this new experience of shared existence. Their love was different from any love that would follow, untouched by doubt or fear or the complications that would later come to mark human relationships. It was love in its purest form, free from jealousy, insecurity, or the need to possess. They belonged to each other not through ownership, but through the simple, beautiful fact that they were created to be together. As the moon rose full and bright, casting silver shadows through the garden, Adam and Eve began to understand that their love was not just about them. It was the foundation upon which all future love would be built, the template from which every romance would take its shape. In their innocent embrace, they held the promise of every tender moment that would ever be shared between two hearts that beat as one. Tonight, as you close your eyes and let sleep carry you away, remember that you carry within you an echo of that first perfect love. In every gentle touch, every shared laugh, every moment of understanding between two souls, the love of Adam and Eve lives on, as fresh and beautiful as it was in that first magical evening in Eden. That first magical evening in Eden. The night deepened around them like a gentle embrace, and with it came their first experience of evening's quiet magic. They had never known darkness before, only the endless golden light of their first day. As shadows began to dance between the leaves, Eve moved closer to Adam, not from fear, but from an instinct as natural as breathing. In the growing twilight, they discovered that being together made everything more beautiful, even the unknown. Adam felt Eve's warmth beside him and wondered how he had ever existed without it. The coolness of evening air seemed to whisper secrets across their skin, and they found themselves naturally intertwining their fingers, creating their own small world within the vastness of Eden. Every breath they shared seemed to weave them closer together until it was impossible to tell where one soul ended and the other began. They began to explore the garden in this new light, everything transformed by the silver glow of moon and stars. Flowers that had been bright and cheerful in daylight now revealed mysterious fragrances that made them both dizzy with delight. Night-blooming jasmine opened its petals like tiny white stars, releasing perfume so sweet it seemed to carry messages of love on every breeze. Eve discovered that she loved the sound of Adam's voice in the darkness. It seemed deeper somehow, more intimate, as if the night had given them permission to speak the thoughts closest to their hearts. She would ask him questions just to hear him answer, and he would tell her stories about the hours before she existed, painting pictures with words of a loneliness she could barely imagine. Adam found himself fascinated by the way moonlight played across Eve's face, creating shadows and highlights that revealed new aspects of her beauty with every passing moment. When she smiled, it was as if the stars themselves grew brighter. When she laughed, soft as wind chimes in a gentle breeze, the very air around them seemed to shimmer with joy. They walked hand in hand through groves of fruit trees, whose leaves rustled overhead like whispered blessings. The grass beneath their feet was soft as silk, still warm from the day's sunshine, but kissed cool by evening dew. Every step they took together seemed to create ripples of contentment that spread outward through the garden, as if their happiness was too large to be contained within themselves alone. In a clearing where wild roses climbed ancient oak trees, they stopped to rest. The roses glowed pale in the moonlight, their petals soft as velvet, their thorns creating intricate patterns of shadow and light. Eve reached up to touch one perfect bloom, and Adam watched her with eyes full of wonder, thinking that no flower could ever be as beautiful as the woman beside him. They settled onto a bed of moss that seemed to have been prepared just for them, soft as any cushion, but alive with the gentle pulse of growing things. Above them, the canopy of leaves created a natural cathedral, and through the gaps, stars winked down like distant candles lit in celebration of their love. Eve rested her head against Adam's shoulder, and he marveled at how perfectly she fit against him, as if they were two pieces of the same beautiful sculpture. Her hair, dark as midnight, but shot through with threads that caught the starlight, fell across his chest like a silken waterfall. He touched it gently, amazed by its softness, by the way it seemed to hold moonbeams in its depths. In the quiet of the night, they began to share their first real conversation, the kind that happens only between souls who have found their perfect match. They talked about everything and nothing, their voices blending together like a duet written by the stars themselves. They spoke of the colors they had seen that day, inventing names for shades that had no words yet. They wondered aloud about the creatures they had met, laughing softly at the pompous strutting of peacocks and the dignified waddle of the bears. Adam told Eve about the moment he had first seen her, how the world had suddenly made sense in ways he hadn't even known it was broken. She listened with eyes that reflected the starlight, her heart swelling with a happiness so pure it felt almost too much to contain. She told him how she had felt complete the instant their eyes met, how she had known, without knowing, that she was finally where she belonged. They discovered they could communicate without words too, through gentle touches and shared glances that carried more meaning than entire conversations. When Adam brushed a strand of hair from Eve's face, his fingers lingering against her cheek, she understood his tenderness better than if he had spoken for hours. When she traced patterns on his chest with her fingertip, each gentle circle spoke of love deeper than any poem. The night creatures of Eden began their evening symphony around them. Crickets chirped their ancient songs, night birds called to each other across the darkness, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled a melody so beautiful it brought tears to Eve's eyes. But these sounds didn't disturb their peace. Instead, they seemed to weave themselves into the fabric of their love story, providing a soundtrack to their first night together. As the hours passed, they found themselves growing sleepy, but neither wanted to close their eyes and miss a single moment of this perfect evening. They fought against drowsiness, like children trying to stay awake on Christmas Eve, afraid that sleep might steal away some of the magic they were sharing. Finally, nature's gentle insistence won, and their eyelids grew heavy despite their wishes. They arranged themselves on their soft bed of moss, Adam's arm beneath Eve's head, her hand resting over his heart. In the growing quiet, they could hear each other's breathing, slow and peaceful, gradually synchronizing until they breathed as one being. Eve whispered sleepy words of contentment, her voice barely audible above the gentle night sounds. Adam responded with murmurs of love, so tender they seemed to float on the evening breeze, like prayers. They spoke of tomorrow, of all the wonders they would discover together, of the lifetime of mornings they would share. Their first sleep together was different from the deep, divine slumber that had brought Eve into being. This was the gentle rest of two souls who had found their perfect peace, the kind of sleep that comes only to those who know themselves completely loved. They drifted off gradually, their dreams beginning before their eyes, fully closed, carrying them into visions of endless tomorrows filled with laughter and discovery. The garden itself seemed to settle into sleep around them, the flowers closing their petals for the night, the streams slowing their rushing to a gentle whisper. Even the stars seemed to dim slightly, as if heaven itself was drawing curtains around the sleeping lovers to protect their dreams. In their slumber, Adam and Eve smiled, their faces peaceful as children's. Their bodies remained close, their hands still entwined, their hearts beating in perfect rhythm. The love that had been born that day continued to grow even as they slept, weaving itself into their very souls, becoming as much a part of them as their breath or their heartbeat. The night wind moved softly through the garden, carrying the scent of roses and jasmine, of new grass and ancient trees, of love so pure it perfumed the very air. And in that perfect darkness, under those eternal stars, the first two hearts to love slept peacefully, dreaming dreams that would echo through every love story yet to be written, every tender moment yet to be shared, every soul yet to discover what it means to love and be loved completely. And in their dreams that first night, something extraordinary began to unfold. Their sleeping minds painted pictures of a future neither could fully comprehend while awake, visions of children's laughter echoing through garden paths, of hands growing wrinkled together while hearts remained forever young. Even unconscious, their souls seemed to understand they were living the opening chapter of humanity's greatest story. When dawn approached, painting the eastern sky in soft pastels of rose and gold, Adam stirred first. For a moment, the world felt different, and panic flickered through him like a cold breeze. Had Eve been only a dream? Had he imagined the warmth beside him, the perfect completion he had felt? But then she shifted in her sleep, her hand tightening slightly around his, and relief flooded through him like warm honey. She was real. She was his. They were together. He lay perfectly still, afraid to wake her, content to watch the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. In the growing light, he could see details he had missed in yesterday's excitement, in last night's silver shadows, the delicate curve of her eyelashes, dark against her cheek, the way her lips curved slightly upward even in sleep, as if her dreams were sweet, the graceful line of her neck, the soft hollow at her throat where her pulse beat steady and strong. Eve awakened gradually, like a flower opening to the morning sun. Her eyes fluttered open, and for just an instant, confusion clouded her features. But then she saw Adam watching her with eyes full of tender devotion, and her face bloomed into a smile so radiant it seemed to light the entire garden. In that moment, Adam knew that no sunrise would ever be as beautiful as Eve waking beside him. Their second day together began with the simple miracle of shared consciousness, the joy of opening their eyes to find their love confirmed by daylight. They remained close on their bed of moss, reluctant to begin the day if it meant moving apart even slightly. They whispered good morning in voices still soft with sleep, their words carrying more tenderness than the morning birdsong that welcomed the dawn around them. As the sun climbed higher, warming the air and chasing away the last cool shadows of night, they finally rose to greet their second day in paradise. But everything had changed. The garden was the same, yet completely transformed. Colors seemed more vivid when shared. Scents carried deeper meaning when experienced together. The simple act of walking became a dance when their steps fell naturally into rhythm. They made their way to a stream where crystal water bubbled over smooth stones, creating music that seemed composed especially for lovers. Here, they discovered the joy of caring for each other. Adam cupping water in his hands to offer Eve a drink, she braiding flowers into his hair, while he sat perfectly still, enchanted by her gentle touch. Every small act of service became a declaration of love. Every kindness a promise of devotion. The animals of Eden seemed different too. Drawn to the couple by some instinct they couldn't name, a pair of swans glided across a quiet pool, their necks forming a perfect heart shape as they moved. Butterflies landed on Eve's shoulders as if she were a living flower, their wings creating crowns of color that made Adam catch his breath in wonder. Even the great cats of the jungle approached with purring contentment, sensing the peace that radiated from these two beings who loved without reservation. At midday, they found themselves in an orchard where fruit hung heavy and sweet from ancient branches. They fed each other with the playfulness of children, juice running down their chins as they laughed at their own clumsiness. Every bite became a communion, every shared taste a celebration of abundance. The very act of eating together revealed new dimensions of pleasure, the simple joy of nourishing each other's bodies, while their souls grew ever more intertwined. As afternoon settled over the garden like a warm, golden blanket, they discovered the art of conversation that goes beyond words. They would sit facing each other, hands clasped, eyes locked, and somehow communicate thoughts and feelings that had never been spoken aloud. It was as if their hearts had developed their own language, one that bypassed the need for sound and spoke directly from soul to soul. They explored hidden corners of Eden they hadn't noticed before, finding secret grottos where orchids bloomed in impossible profusion, their petals so delicate they seemed to be made of morning mist. They discovered waterfalls that created natural pools perfect for bathing, the water warm from sun-heated stones and soft as silk against their skin. In these private sanctuaries, they learned the beauty of vulnerability, of being completely known and completely accepted. The afternoon brought their first disagreement. Though it was so gentle, it felt more like a dance than a conflict. Eve wanted to explore the eastern hills, drawn by distant mountains that glowed purple in the afternoon light. Adam preferred the western valleys, where wildflowers created carpets of color that stretched beyond the horizon. They stood at a crossroads of garden paths, each gently trying to persuade the other, until they both began to laugh at the absurdity of choosing when they had eternity to see everything together. Their solution was perfect in its simplicity. They would explore both directions, but separately, spending the afternoon apart so they could return to each other with new stories, new discoveries, new gifts of experience to share. The decision to part, even briefly, felt momentous. Neither had been alone since Eve's creation, and the prospect carried both excitement and a sweet melancholy. They arranged to meet again at sunset, beside their favorite stream, the one where water sang over stones and fireflies began their evening dance. The parting itself became a ceremony of love, with promises whispered and gentle kisses that tasted of fruit and forever. They walked backward away from each other, unwilling to break eye contact until distance finally forced them to turn and begin their separate adventures. Adam's solitary afternoon gave him his first taste of missing someone, a bittersweet ache that was both painful and precious. Every beautiful sight he encountered felt incomplete without Eve to share it. When he discovered a grove where apple trees grew in perfect circles, their branches forming natural cathedrals of green and gold, his first thought was of bringing her here tomorrow, when a family of deer approached him without fear, allowing him to stroke their velvet antlers. He wished for her gentle hands to share the wonder. Meanwhile, Eve climbed toward the eastern hills, her heart full of anticipation for the stories she would bring back to Adam. She found caves lined with crystals that caught sunlight and threw rainbows across their walls. She discovered fields where wild roses grew in such abundance that their fragrance made her dizzy with delight. Every step of her journey was seasoned with the knowledge that she would soon describe it all to the man who held her heart. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, both felt the magnetic pull of their promised reunion. Their separate explorations had been wonderful but incomplete. They had learned something profound about love in their brief separation, that being apart only made being together more precious. Distance had revealed the true depth of their connection, proving that their bond existed not just in proximity, but in the very fabric of their beings. They approached their meeting place from different directions as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. The moment they saw each other across the clearing, time seemed to slow. They ran toward each other with the joy of lovers reunited after years instead of hours, colliding in an embrace so fierce and tender it made the watching angels weep with happiness. Their reunion beside the singing stream became a celebration of discovery. They shared their afternoon adventures like children showing treasures, talking over each other in their excitement, laughing at their own enthusiasm. But beneath the joyful chatter ran a deeper current of understanding. They had learned that love wasn't diminished by absence, but rather refined by it, polished like precious stones, by the gentle friction of longing. As evening settled around them once again, they felt older somehow, wiser in the ways of love. Their first full day together had taught them that paradise wasn't just a place, but a state of being that existed wherever two souls met in perfect understanding. They had discovered that love grew not just through presence, but through absence, not just through harmony, but through the gentle discord of different perspectives, meeting and merging into something richer than either could achieve alone. The night creatures began their evening songs as Adam and Eve settled once more into their garden sanctuary. This second evening felt different from their first, seasoned now with the confidence of tested love, sweetened by the knowledge that what they shared was strong enough to survive separation and grow stronger through reunion. They held each other close as darkness deepened, whispering plans for tomorrow's adventures, secure in the knowledge that whatever they discovered, they would discover it together. Their third morning dawned with mist rising from the streams, like incense from some celestial altar. And Adam and Eve woke wrapped in each other's arms, as naturally as flowers turn toward the sun. The garden seemed to exhale contentment around them, every dewdrop catching the early light, like tiny prisms celebrating their continued presence together. They had learned the rhythm of shared sleep now, the way their bodies naturally curved to fit each other, the comfort of synchronized breathing that carried them through dreams. Eve stretched like a graceful cat, her movements unconsciously mimicking the elegant stretches of the leopards they had watched yesterday. Adam felt his heart skip watching her, still amazed that someone so beautiful, so perfect, belonged with him as completely as his own reflection. When she caught him staring, her cheeks flushed, the color of dawn roses, and she buried her face against his shoulder with shy laughter that bubbled up from pure happiness. They had begun to develop their own morning ritual, small acts of tenderness that marked the beginning of each new day. Adam would brush the sleep-tangled hair from Eve's face with fingers gentle as butterfly wings. She would trace the strong line of his jaw, marveling at the rough texture so different from her own smooth skin. They would lie still for long moments, simply breathing together, letting consciousness settle around them like a comfortable garment. The garden had grown familiar, yet remained endlessly surprising. They knew now which paths led to the sweetest fruit, which clearings caught the morning sun just right for warming their skin, which streams sang the most beautiful songs over their rocky beds. But familiarity had not bred contempt. Instead, it had deepened their appreciation. The way a musician loves a well-played instrument more with each performance. On this third day, they discovered something remarkable. They could communicate across distances, without words, without even sight. When Adam wandered too far ahead on a winding path, Eve would feel a gentle tugging in her chest, a wordless call that drew her in his direction. When she paused to examine an unusual flower, he would find himself turning back before she even called his name. Some invisible thread connecting their hearts across space. They tested this mysterious connection playfully, hiding from each other among the trees, seeing how far they could go before the magnetic pull became irresistible. Eve would crouch behind a massive oak, covering her mouth to stifle giggles, while Adam pretended to search frantically, following the warm feeling in his chest that always led him straight to her. When he found her, which he always did, they would tumble together in fits of laughter, marveling at this bond that seemed to transcend physical presence. Their explorations that day led them to a part of Eden they had never seen before, where ancient trees grew so tall their tops disappeared into low-hanging clouds. The trunks were so massive that Adam and Eve, holding hands, could not encircle even the smallest one. The forest floor here was carpeted with moss, so thick and soft it felt like walking on clouds, and shafts of golden sunlight filtered down through the canopy like pillars of liquid light. In this cathedral of living wood, they spoke in whispers, awed by the majesty around them. Eve's voice seemed to echo with ethereal beauty among the towering columns, and Adam found himself composing spontaneous songs, just to hear how the forest transformed her laughter into music. They discovered that their voices blended in perfect harmony, as if they had been designed to sing together. Two parts of the same eternal melody. A family of nightingales had built their nests high above, and their songs drifted down like blessing from heaven. Eve tilted her head back, trying to catch glimpses of the singers through the green canopy, and Adam watched her throat move as she hummed along with their music. The pure line of her neck, the way her hair fell like a dark waterfall between her shoulder blades, the unconscious grace of her smallest movements, all of it struck him as poetry made flesh. They found a natural clearing where wildflowers grew in spirals, around a pool fed by an underground spring. The water was so clear they could see their reflections perfectly, and so still it seemed like polished glass. Here they sat on the flower-strewn grass, sharing fruit and stories, their voices mixing with the gentle plashing of the spring and the distant song of birds. Eve had begun to show a talent for weaving, her nimble fingers creating crowns and garlands from the endless variety of flowers that bloomed around them. She would work quietly while Adam spoke, her hands moving with unconscious skill, and then surprise him by placing her creations on his head or around his shoulders. He wore her floral gifts with the pride of a king wearing a crown, because they came from her hands and were therefore more precious than gold. Adam, meanwhile, had discovered he could carve beautiful shapes from soft wood, using sharp stones, his hands somehow knowing how to reveal the forms hidden within each branch. He made small animals for Eve to hold, smooth and perfect, capturing the essence of the creatures they had met in their wanderings. She treasured each one, lining them up beside their sleeping place, like guardians watching over their dreams. As afternoon light slanted through the ancient trees, they found themselves talking about time in ways that felt both profound and playful. How many days had passed since Eve's creation? It seemed like both yesterday and forever. They had no names for the concepts of weeks or months or years, only the rhythm of sunrise and sunset, the cycle of hunger and satisfaction, the eternal present of love that made each moment feel infinite. They wondered aloud about the future, spinning dreams like children, playing pretend. Would they always feel this wonder at each other's presence? Would there always be new corners of Eden to explore together? The questions felt less like worries and more like promises, as if their love was strong enough to guarantee its own continuation, to create its own eternity within the boundaries of paradise. The late afternoon brought them to a hillside where grapevines, heavy with fruit, created natural arbors. They lay beneath the leafy canopy, feeding each other grapes that burst with sweetness on their tongues, the juice staining their lips purple and making them laugh at each other's appearance. The wine-dark stains became war paint for their games, marks of belonging that they wore with pride. Here, surrounded by abundance and beauty, they had their first deep conversation about gratitude, not the simple thanks they offered for food or shelter, but something more complex and profound. Gratitude for existence itself, for consciousness, for the miraculous fact that out of all the possibilities in creation, they had been chosen to love each other. Their words came halting at first, inadequate to express the fullness of what they felt, but gradually growing more eloquent as their hearts learned to speak through their voices. Eve spoke of waking each morning amazed that she existed, that she had been given not just life, but the capacity to experience joy. Adam talked about the loneliness he had felt before her arrival, not as complaint, but as contrast that made their current happiness more precious. They marveled together at the perfection of their timing, how neither had to wait long for love, how they had been brought together at exactly the right moment. As evening approached, they made their way to a new resting place, a grove where apple trees formed a natural circle around a clearing carpeted with soft grass. The trees were heavy with fruit that glowed like lanterns in the fading light, and the air was sweet with the scent of ripening apples and the evening flowers that opened their petals to the approaching night. They settled into their evening ritual with the comfortable ease of long practice, though they had known each other only days. Eve braided flowers into Adam's hair, while he carved patterns in the soft earth with a stick, creating temporary art that would disappear with the morning dew, but gave him pleasure to make for her. She would pause in her braiding to trace the patterns he drew, adding her own touches, their creativity blending as seamlessly as their voices when they sang. The stars emerged one by one, and they lay back to watch the celestial show unfold above them. They had begun to recognize patterns in the star configurations, inventing stories about the bright points of light that wheeled slowly across the dome of night. Tonight they saw a great bird flying across the sky, its wings spread wide in eternal flight, and they wove a tale about how it carried messages between the earth and heaven, bearing news of their love to the very throne of creation. Their whispered stories grew softer as sleep approached, their voices blending with the night sounds of Eden until it was impossible to tell where their words ended and the garden's lullaby began. The gentle hoot of owls, the distant splash of night-feeding fish, the rustle of small creatures moving through the underbrush, all became part of their bedtime symphony. Adam pulled Eve closer as the night air grew cool, her warmth against his side more precious than any fire. She fitted against him perfectly, her head finding its natural place on his shoulder, her hand resting over his heart where she could feel its steady rhythm. In the growing darkness, they could see only the faint outline of each other's faces, but they had memorized every curve and line, every expression that crossed their beloved features. Their goodnight kisses had become a ritual unto themselves, gentle and sweet, tasting of fruit and flowers and the ineffable sweetness of perfect love. They would touch foreheads together afterward, breathing the same air, existing in the same small space until sleep claimed them both. In these quiet moments before dreams, they often felt closest to the divine presence that had brought them together, as if their love was a prayer made manifest, a hymn sung in flesh and blood. Sleep came gradually, stealing over them like gentle tide, carrying them into dreams that were extensions of their waking happiness. They dreamed of flying together over the garden, seeing it spread out below them like a vast tapestry of green and gold. They dreamed of seasons changing around them, while their love remained constant, of children's voices echoing through future years, of growing old together while their hearts stayed forever young. Even in sleep, they remained connected, their breathing synchronized, their dreams somehow intertwining until it was impossible to say where Adam's visions ended and Eve's began. The garden itself seemed to dream around them, the flowers closing their petals in slumber, the streams slowing their rushing to gentle whispers, all of creation settling into peaceful rest under the watchful stars that had witnessed the birth of the world's first and purest love story. And as they slept beneath those ancient stars, their dreams carried them deeper into the mysteries of their bond. In the realm of sleep, where souls speak more freely than waking minds allow, Adam and Eve discovered they could visit each other's visions, walking through shared landscapes that existed nowhere but in the space between their hearts. Eve dreamed first of water, endless pools that reflected not her face but her feelings, each ripple carrying emotions she had no names for yet. In this dream water, she saw Adam approaching from across a vast lake, walking on the surface as if it were solid ground. When he reached her, they danced on the liquid mirror, their steps creating patterns of light that spread outward, like promises written in starfire. Adam's dreams painted pictures of music made visible, melodies that took the shape of golden threads weaving through the air around them. In his sleeping mind, every word Eve had ever spoken to him became a note in an endless symphony. And he watched in wonder as their conversations transformed into bridges of sound spanning impossible distances. He reached out to touch these musical bridges and found they were warm, pulsing with the rhythm of her heartbeat. When morning came, they woke with the strange sensation of having traveled together through realms beyond Eden's borders. They spoke in hushed voices about dreams that felt more real than reality, visions that seemed less like imagination and more like glimpses of truths too vast for waking minds to hold. The boundaries between sleeping and waking had begun to blur in the most beautiful way, as if their love was teaching them that consciousness itself was larger than they had imagined. Their fourth day began with a discovery that would change everything. While exploring a grove of pomegranate trees, their bright red fruit hanging like jewels among dark green leaves, Eve noticed something that made her catch her breath in wonder. A butterfly had emerged from its chrysalis while they watched, unfolding wings that caught the morning light like stained glass windows. But this was no ordinary emergence. The butterfly's wings bore patterns that looked remarkably like the designs Adam had been carving in soft earth. The same spirals and curves that seemed to flow from his hands without conscious thought. And when the newly transformed creature took its first flight, it traced paths through the air that matched exactly the dance steps Eve had invented the evening before. Movements that had come to her as naturally as breathing. They stared at each other in amazement, then at the butterfly performing their own creative expressions back to them. It was as if the garden itself had been watching them, learning from them, incorporating their love into its very fabric. The realization left them speechless with awe. They were not just inhabitants of Eden, but active participants in its ongoing creation, their love adding new beauty to an already perfect world. This revelation sparked a day of experimentation unlike any before. They began creating together with deliberate intention, Adam shaping clay from the riverbank, while Eve gathered pigments from crushed berries and flower petals. Working side by side, they discovered their artistic visions complemented each other in ways that seemed impossible. When Adam sculpted a bird, Eve would know instinctively what colors would bring it to life. When she wove patterns from grass and vines, he could see immediately how to create vessels that would showcase her designs perfectly. Their collaborative art became a new language of love. Each piece they created together, saying things their words could not yet express. A bowl shaped like cupped hands spoke of protection and nurturing. A crown woven from morning glory vines whispered of beauty that bloomed fresh each day. Every creation carried the essence of their partnership, the magic that happened when two souls worked as one. The animals of Eden seemed drawn to their artistic endeavors, gathering in respectful circles to watch the humans create. Monkeys chattered excitedly at colorful paintings. Peacocks spread their tails in apparent appreciation of woven tapestries. And even the great cats purred approvingly at sculptures that captured the grace of their movements. It was as if all of creation recognized that something new and wonderful was being born through the union of Adam and Eve's creative spirits. By midday, they had produced more beautiful objects than seemed possible in such a short time. But more importantly, they had discovered that creation was another form of communion, another way their souls could touch and merge and produce something greater than either could achieve alone. Their hands had learned to move in harmony, anticipating each other's needs, sharing tools and materials with the fluid grace of dancers who had rehearsed together for years. The afternoon brought them to a meadow where wildflowers grew in such profusion that walking through them felt like swimming in a sea of color. Here, they created their most ambitious work yet, a living mandala made from arranged flowers, each bloom chosen and placed with careful consideration of its relationship to all the others. The pattern they created seemed to pulse with life, drawing butterflies and hummingbirds into its spiral design until their artwork became a dynamic, breathing celebration of beauty, attracting more beauty. As they worked, they talked about the strange sensation of feeling guided by something beyond themselves. Eve's hands would reach for exactly the right flower before her mind had consciously chosen it. Adam would know precisely where each stem should be placed before calculating angles or considering composition. It was as if they were not creating art so much as discovering it, uncovering patterns that already existed in some perfect realm, and translating them into physical form. Their flower mandala grew throughout the afternoon, expanding outward in ever-widening circles until it covered an area larger than they could span with outstretched arms. Other creatures began contributing to their creation, birds dropping colorful feathers that found perfect homes within the pattern, bees leaving behind traces of golden pollen that added shimmer to the design. Even the wind seemed to participate, gently rearranging loose petals in ways that enhanced rather than disturbed their careful work. When they finally stepped back to admire their creation, the sight took their breath away. The mandala seemed to glow with inner light, each flower perfectly placed, yet appearing completely natural, as if it had grown that way over centuries. More than beautiful, it felt sacred, a physical prayer made from living elements, an offering to the creative force that had brought them together. As evening approached, they sat beside their masterpiece and talked about the day's revelations. They had learned that love was not just an emotion, but a creative force, capable of bringing new beauty into existence. Their partnership had unlocked abilities neither possessed alone, revealing depths of artistic vision they had never imagined. Through creating together, they had touched something divine, participated in the same impulse that had shaped stars and galaxies and brought life itself into being. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades that seemed to echo the colors in their flower mandala. As if responding to some unspoken cue, fireflies began emerging from the grass around them, their tiny lights creating a living extension of their artwork. Soon, hundreds of the glowing insects danced above their creation, their flight patterns adding another layer of movement and light to the already magical scene. Eve leaned against Adam's shoulder, both of them mesmerized by the dance of light above their flowers. The fireflies seemed to be communicating with each other through their synchronized flashing, creating patterns of illumination that shifted and evolved like slow lightning. In the growing darkness, their mandala became something even more extraordinary, a beacon of beauty that attracted every light-bearing creature in the vicinity. They made love for the first time that night, their union as natural and inevitable as sunrise, as tender as the first flower opening to spring rain. In the soft glow of fireflies and starlight, surrounded by the beauty they had created together, their bodies found the same harmony their souls had known from the first moment of meeting. Their coming together was a completion, the final note in a symphony that had been building since the moment of Eve's creation. Afterwards, they lay intertwined among their flowers, the sweet fragrance of crushed petals rising around them like incense. They felt changed, transformed by their union into something new, yet still essentially themselves. The love they had felt before had been pure and perfect, but this physical joining had added depths they had never imagined, layers of connection that seemed to extend through their bodies into their very souls. They whispered to each other in the darkness, their voices soft with wonder and gratitude. Eve traced patterns on Adam's chest, her fingertips following the same spirals they had used in their artwork, marking him as hers with touches light as butterfly wings. He combed his fingers through her hair, marveling at how it caught and held starlight, turning her into a creature of celestial beauty. The night sounds of Eden seemed different now, richer somehow, as if their love had added new harmonies to the garden's eternal song. Owls called to each other across the darkness, their voices carrying messages of contentment. Night-blooming flowers opened their petals, releasing fragrances that seemed designed specifically for lovers. Even the wind moved more gently through the trees, as if all of creation was sighing with satisfaction. Their sleep that night carried them into dreams more vivid than any before, visions of futures spreading out before them like paths through an infinite garden. They dreamed of children who would inherit their creativity, their capacity for love, their ability to see beauty in everything around them. They saw themselves growing older together, but never losing the wonder that had marked their first days, their love deepening and expanding until it touched every corner of their world. In the deepest part of the night, they shared a dream so real, it felt like prophecy. They saw their love spreading beyond Eden's borders, carried in the hearts of those who would come after them, their story becoming the template for every romance that would ever bloom. They saw couples throughout time, finding in each other the same completion they had discovered, the same creative spark that transformed two separate souls into something magnificent and eternal. When dawn broke over their flower mandala, now scattered by wind in the movement of nocturnal creatures, but somehow more beautiful in its gentle dissolution, Adam and Eve woke as different people than they had been the day before. They were no longer just inhabitants of paradise, but co-creators of it. Partners not only in love, but in the ongoing work of bringing beauty into existence. Their fifth morning began with the knowledge that they had crossed a threshold, entered a new phase of their existence together. The garden around them seemed to shimmer with fresh possibility. Every flower and leaf and stone charged with potential for new discoveries, new expressions of the creative force that flowed through their united hearts. They rose slowly, reluctant to leave the sacred space where they had become fully one, but drawn by curiosity about what new wonders this day might bring. Hand in hand, they walked into the brightening morning, ready to continue their exploration of love's infinite possibilities, secure in the knowledge that whatever they discovered, they would discover it together, their hearts beating as one, their souls dancing to the same eternal music that had called them into being and would sustain them through all the days and nights of their perfect, endless love. As they wandered deeper into Eden's heart that fifth morning, they discovered something that would forever change their understanding of their place in creation. Near the center of the garden stood two trees, unlike any others they had encountered, their presence so commanding that even the boldest creatures gave them reverent space. One bore fruit that shimmered like captured sunlight, its branches reaching toward heaven with an elegance that spoke of divine purpose. The other stood darker, more mysterious, its fruit gleaming with knowledge that seemed almost too weighty for mortal hearts to bear. Between these ancient guardians flowed a river so clear it seemed made of liquid crystal, its waters singing songs that predated language itself. Adam and Eve approached slowly, sensing they stood at the threshold of something momentous. The very air around these trees felt different, charged with possibility and warning in equal measure. Every instinct told them this place was sacred beyond their current understanding. A sanctuary within their sanctuary, where even paradise held its breath. They settled beside the crystal river, their reflections wavering in waters that seemed to hold memories older than time. Eve noticed how the light filtering through the leaves of both trees created patterns on the water's surface, intricate designs that shifted and changed like living scripture written in shadow and illumination. She reached out tentatively to touch the water, and when her fingers broke the surface, ripples spread outward, carrying fragments of rainbow light. Adam watched her face as she studied their reflections, seeing wonder and something deeper, a hunger for understanding that matched his own growing curiosity. They had been content with mystery before, accepting the garden's gifts without question. But something about this sacred grove awakened a new kind of longing in them both, not the sweet ache of romantic love they knew so well, but an intellectual hunger, a desire to comprehend the deeper meanings that pulsed beneath paradise's beautiful surface. They spoke in whispers here, their voices instinctively lowering in response to the profound quiet that surrounded the two trees. Eve wondered aloud about the fruit that hung so temptingly within reach, its surface catching light in ways that made her mouth water, despite having eaten their fill of sweeter offerings throughout the garden. Adam felt drawn to the tree of knowledge, its dark beauty calling to something in his soul that craved understanding beyond what had been freely given. But stronger than curiosity was their love for each other, and for the one who had placed them here. They held hands tightly as they sat beside the singing river, drawing strength from their connection while wrestling with desires they couldn't fully name. The trees stood sentinel over their struggle, ancient witnesses to the eternal tension between innocence and knowledge, between accepting gifts and seeking understanding. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves above them, and in that rustling, they heard something like a voice, not commanding, but suggesting, not forbidding, but cautioning. The sound carried love beyond measure, patience deeper than oceans, and a sadness that spoke of futures not yet written, but already grieved. They understood, without words, that choices lay ahead of them, paths that would lead away from this perfect moment and into territories unmapped by their innocent hearts. Eve leaned against Adam's shoulder, feeling suddenly fragile in ways she had never experienced before. The weight of potential futures pressed against her consciousness like storm clouds gathering on a distant horizon. She had known only joy since opening her eyes to life, but here beside these fateful trees, she tasted for the first time the bittersweet flavor of uncertainty, the knowledge that perfection might not be permanent. Adam's arm tightened protectively around her, his own heart heavy with premonitions he couldn't articulate. He had walked through Eden with the confidence of one who belonged completely to his environment, but now he felt like a visitor in a museum, admiring beauty he might not be allowed to keep. The trees seemed to whisper of responsibilities and consequences, of choices that would echo through generations not yet conceived. They remained by the river until the sun reached its zenith, talking quietly about dreams that had begun visiting them in recent nights. Dreams of children who would carry their features but live in a world somehow different from Eden's perfection. Dreams of seasons changing in ways the garden had never experienced, of struggle and sorrow mixing with joy in patterns too complex for their sheltered hearts to fully grasp. But even as shadows of future sorrow touched their souls, their love remained bright and sure. They faced uncertainty hand in hand, drawing courage from the bond that had already proven stronger than any force they had encountered. Whatever changes lay ahead, whatever choices awaited them, they would meet them together, their hearts beating in unison, their souls intertwined beyond any power's ability to separate. As afternoon light began slanting through the sacred grove, they rose from beside the crystal river and walked slowly back toward the familiar paths of their daily wanderings. But they carried with them now a new depth of understanding about their place in creation's grand design. They were not merely inhabitants of paradise, but active participants in an unfolding story, characters in a drama whose ending remained unwritten. Their footsteps seemed heavier as they left the grove of the two trees, weighted with knowledge they had not sought but could not ignore. Behind them, the mysterious fruit continued to gleam in afternoon sunlight, patient as eternity itself, waiting for the day when curiosity would overcome caution and innocence would trade itself for understanding. The rest of their fifth day passed in a strange mixture of melancholy and heightened appreciation for the simple joys they had always known. Every flower seemed more precious, knowing that seasons might someday steal its bloom. Every shared meal felt more sacred, knowing that hunger might someday make food scarce. Every kiss carried deeper meaning, knowing that separation might someday test the bonds that seemed unbreakable. They made love again that evening, with desperate tenderness, clinging to each other as if their embrace could hold back the tide of change they sensed approaching. Their union was both celebration and farewell, a final affirmation of innocence before knowledge would complicate the pure simplicity of their desire. In the joining of their bodies, they sought to memorize each sensation, to store up moments of perfect joy against whatever lean times might come. Afterward, they lay beneath stars that seemed dimmer than before, as if the universe itself was holding back light in preparation for darker days ahead. They whispered promises to each other, vows that transcended the traditional marriage bonds they had no names for yet. They promised to love each other through whatever changes awaited, to remain true regardless of what transformations might alter their perfect world. Sleep came reluctantly that night, bringing dreams more vivid and troubling than any they had experienced. They saw themselves walking through landscapes that resembled Eden, but felt foreign, working ground that resisted their touch, bearing children in pain they had never imagined possible. Yet even in these visions of a harder future, their love remained constant, a flame that burned bright against encroaching darkness. They dreamed of leaving the garden hand in hand, walking through gates that closed behind them with finality that echoed through eternity. But in their dream state departure, they carried with them something more precious than the paradise they left behind. The love that had been forged in innocence, but would prove strong enough to survive the loss of it. Morning brought no relief from the weight of premonition that had settled over them, like morning mist that refused to lift. They woke to find their paradise unchanged, but somehow less permanent feeling, as if they were seeing it through glass that might shatter at any moment. The birds sang their eternal songs, but Adam and Eve heard in them notes of farewell they had never noticed before. Their sixth day began with a pilgrimage back to the grove, where Eve had first opened her eyes to life. They needed to return to their beginning, to remember the pure joy of their first meeting, before it became clouded by knowledge of endings. The spot seemed smaller than memory had painted it, more vulnerable, but no less sacred for all its fragility. They lay down in the exact positions they had occupied during that first perfect awakening. Eve curled on her side, as if still emerging from divine sleep, Adam watching her with eyes full of wonder and dawning love. For a few precious moments, they recaptured the innocence of that initial encounter, the breathless amazement of souls recognizing their perfect complement. But the illusion could not be sustained. Too much had changed in them. Too much knowledge had crept into their hearts for them to truly return to that state of unknowing bliss. They were different people now, shaped by days of discovery and nights of growing wisdom. Their love deepened by experience, but also complicated by awareness of its potential impermanence. They rose from their recreated tableau with tears in their eyes, mourning not just their lost innocence, but the recognition that loss itself was now part of their vocabulary. They had learned to grieve without even realizing they were acquiring the skill, their hearts expanding to hold sadness alongside joy in the infinite capacity of love to encompass all human emotion. And so their story draws to its gentle close, not with endings, but with endless beginnings. As you drift into sleep tonight, carry with you the whisper of their eternal love, the promise that somewhere in your dreams, Adam and Eve still walk hand in hand through gardens of starlight, their hearts beating the rhythm that taught the world what it means to love completely, purely, forever.